Jasper is known for being such a scenic and historic town. So joining us to discuss what's at risk of being lost here is Craig Baird. Craig is the host of the Canadian History Exh podcast, and he joins us from Stony Plain, Alberta. Craig, thank you so much for making time for us this evening.
Oh, thank you for having me.
When you think of Jasper, maybe you think of the geography, the mountains, the trees, all of that, but it's also the town. What comes to mind first? What sights come to mind first when you think of Jasper?
Well, I mean, there's plenty of sites that come to mind. I've been to Jasper many times throughout my life just because of how close I do live to it. There's things like the Jasper Park Lodge, which, has a deep history. It has people like Marilyn Monroe and Bing Crosby, King George VII, and Queen Elizabeth stayed there in 1939. And then there's other places. There's the Information Center, which was the original rail station that everybody arrived on. And that was kind of, for people, their first look at Jasper was at that rail station. There's many other places. There's the St. Mary and St. George's Anglican Church, which unfortunately I heard was burned down. And it was built in 1928. Queen Elizabeth attended a service there. So there's lots of history in the community. And for a lot of people, a lot of memories at these places that hopefully some of us survived.
You mentioned the railroad component to this. I mean, it began as a railroad town, didn't it?
Absolutely, it did. So it began in about 1909 as Fitzhugh, and then it was in 1913 that its name officially changed to Jasper. And that came from Jasper House back when it used to be a fur trading post way back in about 1813 in the early 19th century. But it was the railroad that really built this community up and created it and gave people their first real link to what would become the Jasper National Park.
We heard the name Maligne Lodge quite a bit. There's also Maligne Lake. I just wondered, is there a significance to that name?
I don't believe there's any major significance to that name. I think it might have come from the indigenous people who were the first ones to kind of take people there to see the lake. But obviously, I know that the lodge itself dated back about 60 years and was within the family for most of that time. So that is definitely a significant loss to the community.
Yeah, when you think about the potential here, I mean, we don't know which structures specifically were lost. The latest update said it was primarily in the west of the town of Jasper where the most destruction happened. But people are just trying to piece together through photos and videos that they've gotten from, firefighters who've been in the area to get a sense of what's left. What do you feel is at risk of being lost here?
Well, like I said, the Jasper Information Center probably is one of the most significant buildings in the community. It was one of the first buildings built in Jasper, and like I said, it was the railway station, so very important to Jasper's history, and it's very unique in terms of railway stations. In the prairies, they're usually built of wood and very simple, but in Jasper, it was built of stone and is really an elegant building. And then there's places like the Fire Hall, which was a historic building built in 1936, the Athabasca Hotel, which was built in 1928 and was another important stopping place for a lot of people, especially when they first moved to the community. That's where many of them first stayed. So there's all of these places that are at risk from that fire. And, looking at the map, you hope some have survived, but right now it's all kind of just up in the air of what survived and what didn't. But like I said, there are certain places like the St. Mary, St. George's Anglican Church, which unfortunately was destroyed.
Yeah, really unfortunate, Craig. Thank you so much for joining us and telling us more about the history of Jasper. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
That was Craig Baird. He's host of Canadian History Exh podcast, and he joined us from Stony Plain, Alberta.